And I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another Acro Insights. And today we've got quite a nice group of people talking to us. We already did a bit of intro. We had quite some laughs. We talked about drinks and cocktails and everything else, but we're going into quite a serious topic. And before we do so, I would like to introduce everybody here, and I would like to thank Quantum a lot for hosting this webinar. We've been working with you guys for a few years, and you've done some very interesting workshops and introductions during our events, and we're really, really happy that you're going to do it live online now as well. So thank you so much for doing that for us. But before we get started, let's introduce who we've got here. So first of all, John, you're the owner of Quantum. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I think you just did. So, apart from being the youngest member on this panel, and I just wanted to make sure that was out there in advance, I am the designated representative of Quantum. And in this particular webinar, we are the designated supplier in the group of four who represent, boat construction and boats that are built and the various people that contribute to that.
Well, thank you so much. Tommy, welcome. Tommy Gurr.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. Tommy Gurr, the captain of Aquarius. I was the build captain for the final period of the last year of the build of Fedship 695, which we launched in 2016. And I'm still here today and really looking forward to chatting here with the guys.
Well, welcome. And I've heard that a very special guest who is here with us, Pixie Newby. He's supposed to. So Pixie, welcome to you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Pixie Newby. I'm presently build engineer on Project 707 at Fedship at De Vries. Prior to that, several other builds, and I come from a commercial background.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Pixie. And last but certainly not least, the host of today, the moderator of this session, Dan. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Dan Robsham. I'm an owner's rep on the H21 new build project at Lurzen right now, and have been working in the industry for well over 30 years, almost as much as John.
Well over.
Yeah, well over. We have a great topic today because we were asked to share a few lessons that we might have picked up along the way. All of us here have been in the yachting industry or the commercial industry for well over 30 years, and we've all made a full-time career of it. John pretends to work, but I think he does it because he has a lot of fun. Actually, it's the first focus. But I think we all have a lot of fun, and we all enjoy what we're doing. And we've been asked to just convey a little bit some of the lessons learned along the way. And over the past couple of days, we've talked back and forth about some of the things that we learned and like to share with the folks coming up. And all of it will do you good just to think a little bit about and bat it around in the crew mess or with your friends as you go. And some of the things we talked about would be when we're delivering a new project or setting up a new project, it has different phases. It has the pre-construction, pre-contract phase, and then it has the early construction phase and the middle build period, and finally the delivery and going into service. So if you attend or work at a build anywhere in Europe, Asia, the United States, the topics are all the same. In general, the topics are very much the same. So one of the things we talked about first yesterday was developing a specification, and that's a collaboration between what the owner wants, what the shipyard can deliver, what the crew knows is necessary to give the owner a good experience, and how to communicate those expectations. Because in yachting, we also know that it's very much nobody needs a yacht. It's not designed to achieve a particular fuel burn rate like a container ship or carry a certain amount of cargo like a tanker. It's more for the comfort and the use of the owner. And so this has to be borne in mind. Tommy, yesterday we talked a lot about requirements of owners that you've dealt with in the years past. What type of things did you come across when you were trying to develop a specification?
One of the key things that we were trying to fit in was trying to avoid guest cabins becoming too small and too pokey, to try and give the guests and the invited guests as unique and VIP experience as they possibly could, which midway through the ownership that I had before, we looked at building a 73 meter, and the compromises that we made trying to keep the same 92 meter cabins into a 73 meter really put so much pressure on the back of house, which meant the crew mess and other things, crew cabins, the amount of crew that we can have to facilitate the boat started to diminish, and it was becoming an incredibly complex project, which we ended up canceling because we just weren't able to do it in that size. And we stuck with the 92 meter.
That's a big jump.
Yeah. So yeah,
I think, Pixie, have you seen a similar thing where guest requirements overwhelm technical or service requirements back of the house?
Absolutely, it tends to be all the time. Technical requirements are always last on the list and are squeezed out as much as possible, unfortunately. But real estate is very important for owners. Just sometimes their conception of the technical spaces required aren't laid or presented to them in such a way where they won't disregard them.
Yeah, a difficult challenge. I think I've heard of that on every new build that I've been involved in. The owner sits down and draws on the back of a napkin how much space he wants, and nobody ever heard of an air duct, a cableway, an air conditioning route, or a deck locker for that matter. Even some new builds, they've decided to eliminate the access to the engine room and just make that through a guest area because that was the most convenient place. So it's quite a challenge. How about the collaboration between designers and the shipyard and yourselves? What have you seen, Tommy?
Well, as I said, design tends to be the focus at the beginning, and then the shipyard. So you turn up at the shipyard with these wonderful drawings that designers have made that are over elaborate and wonderful and sucked owners into the excitement of what their new 90-meter boat's going to look like. Then you go to 3 shipyards, and then they've got different variants. Do they want 2 pairs of quantum stabilizers or a single pair? Is their hull shape going to do it? Is the beam going to be able to do it? And it then starts to take shape as to how the whole project evolves, and everybody has that slight little different nuance. In Holland, you've got the canals to deal with. In Germany, you don't have to worry about it so much. So it's amazing how quickly design can take over, and then it becomes very difficult to actually achieve it in a costly and cost-effective manner. Yeah, if you don't have a worry about cost, the sky's the limit. But you have to worry about the cost a little bit of whether you stay in Germany or whether you go down to Italy or Turkey or anywhere else. So as I say, there's lots of decisions that designers can influence.
Yeah, I've found that there's several circles of influence in the industry. You know, the first circle of influence is the owner and his direct family. Then we have a circle of influence by the owner's finance office, and a circle of influence that's the crew and the captain and the engineer. And then a circle of influence that is the designers, and a circle of influence that's yacht broker, and another one for the shipyard. And it seems whatever gets done is only where all of these circles overlap. It only survives in that one place.
It's quite incredible. A few little crew wish lists can suddenly add millions of dollars to the cost of a build, whether it be side boarding ladders, lovely drop down swim platforms, just even the simple boom that comes out to tie the tender to. They can become incredibly costly at the early stage, which can often just put an owner off signing the contract.
Indeed, or where they have to make the boat bigger than they thought because they can't fit it in. I've had exactly the same experience. I think Pixie, your experiences is they just cut out the technical space and you deal with it.
You just live with it, or you try to go back to the signed drawing of the GA contract signing and wonder where on earth everything was supposed to be fitted when they agreed to sign it.
Now, John, you talked to me the other day. We had a discussion about naval architecture at a very early stage. What are some things that Quantum has found and your team has found when you're looking at a new build in the very early stage? What type of things do you like to get in the specification?
Well, ideally, the biggest stabilizers I can right from the beginning, but generally that doesn't happen. So you have to, consider, like, for us guys, we are like early stage guys. So the boat, when the shipyard's quoting the boat, they have to put some heavy duty numbers together and some of the major pieces of equipment, and stabilizers is one of those. They have to get a number to it. But generally, they don't have all the information on the boat. They don't know exactly what it's going to displace. They don't exactly know what the GM is going to be. And they may not even have a full set of lines drawings. So they're sort of feeling out generalizations to people like us. And we have to work with that. And where that might not appear so relevant in this conversation, because we're sort of directed at once the boat's into service and the crew and the people that operate it, it does affect it, because we often get, boxed into a certain specification or a certain set of equipment from the early days, and financially we're limited within that, and then things change on the boat, and then it goes into service, and we have to sort of manage expectations, and that's quite complicated in the stabilizer land, because just unlike, say, an engine where you can guarantee a certain amount of fuel and a certain speed to the boat, stabilizer is sort of a feel. It's not exactly a science. The client has to believe that it's okay. They have to be comfortable, and their belief in comfort. And so, we can't say, well, it's 80% roll reduction or 50% roll reduction. It's what does the client see and what do the crew feel on board? And if it's not working, the crew kind of feel the backlash of that from the owner. So, the understanding the equipment and managing the expectations and knowing that from the very onset of the job, things might have been set into concrete, even though, the general progression of the development of the ship changed. The stabilizers got locked in at an early stage, and that's an important factor. And I think it's important for the crew to know that. And then you go on to the operation of it all.
You mentioned something that we talked about yesterday, and that's managing or meeting expectations. And in my personal experience in yachting, of course, it's all about the boss and their family, because they pay the bill. I mean, I've heard it said, oh, well, the shipyard pays for that. Well, in the end, the shipyard doesn't pay for anything. They just pass the cost through to the owner as either a fixed base price or as part of an added option. So the owner is paying for everything. And as we said, no one really needs a yacht. So it's a pretty owner-centric thing. But we talked about not only do we have the technical expertise to meet expectations, but sometimes comes a little bit of a political expertise. And so, Tommy, what have you done that found out that you have found worked well in managing the expectations of these different parties, the owner, the family, the finance, the builder, all of that?
The builder and the family is always difficult. My previous boss was very much a contract guy, and we had limited change orders during the build of Aquarius. In fact, I think there were only 7 throughout the whole build. His previous life as a hotel builder helped him control these things, so he knew that once he'd signed a contract, it was easy just to stick with it. Because you start trying to move things during build, it means bulkhead changes. There's lots of technical things that need to move along with it, and it gets expensive. It needs that the expectations need to be there at the very early doors of what they want. They need to understand what space is going to look like, and the ability to stand rooms up in the design phase where they can actually picture what they walk into makes life great. But when they do arrive and come, the rooms feel the way they do, the spaces feel the way they should, the bathrooms work the same way. So it's constant communication, and then once it's up and running, it's constant communication. Things break. It's boats. Hey boss, your shower's not working. We're on it. hey boss, your AV system's not working, and then you get slapped around the head and said it never works. But it's constant lines of communication about things that are working and aren't working, and from shipyard suppliers. If you've got honest communication and pragmatic communication, you can deem a lot of respect with each other that you get the straight answer. When will my door be ready? 2 weeks, Tommy. Okay, cool. And it turns up in 2 weeks. And that trust that you have with your vendors and therefore with your owner, when you promise him something and it arrives on time, these are never problems because you always achieve what you've promised. No one minds if it's broken, but they hate being the people that find things that are broken. And that's the expectation is good planned maintenance, good maintenance on board, and good observations on board.
Oh, super. Pixie, how have you dealt with expectations and changing expectations during a build?
Yeah, that seems to be more and more prevalent now, depending on the experience of the owner, whether they've built before or whether they've in a particular yard or somewhere else, and with technology being one of the biggest drivers now for the builds, especially AVIT, and it is changing at such a rapid pace that the build that I'm almost completing now, we know we're out of date on certain things that the owner wants already, just simply because the technology has leapt on so much. And his expectations are driven by what he has shore-based. And unfortunately, that's what we have to try and match on board. And it is becoming more and more difficult.
Is there when you go to the AVIT and technology topic, is there a way to future-proof or to plan in advance? I mean, when we think about AVIT, clearly no one can predict the size of a TV or the width of the frit around a TV 3 or 4 years in advance when you have to select the cable backbone and the power supplies and the position and the arrangement of the room. But is there a way to deal with that in advance that you found helps?
Not trying to go with the most modern vendors that have a push for more modern equipment or willing to look at equipment that's maybe not on the cusp, but certainly looking to the future, because things like even now we've put USB ports in everywhere, thinking that's the best way to go for charging. And then within 12 months, everybody now uses iPad flat chargers, and they want those built in furniture. And it's very much driven. I think it's on the length of the builds of 3 years, it's almost impossible to predict what's going to happen. Certainly with the way people come or guests come from ashore and they bring all their equipment and they just expect everything to work straight away. And no matter how well everything is engineered and maintained on board, the new technology just seems to take over the ability of us to be able to modify it on board.
And user patterns. I know that one yacht that both you and I worked on, it was designed with AVIT equipment, and the first guest trip they proved that they wanted to just plug their iPhones in and get the noise from that. It was the most incredible thing to see that all of the video libraries and all the other capacities, no one was interested in playing anything except that what they could get from their iPhone. And it was younger family members were quite interested in that.
Dan, do you mind if I ask a question in between? I know that this is not all pre-planned, but I was just wondering what I'm learning from you guys, and I find it highly interesting. I think a lot of people that are going to do their first new build, whether they are a junior crew member or a senior crew member being involved, is how do you then manage those expectations? Because you're basically saying the build process is 3 years, and you cannot deliver everything state of the art, but how do you, and there are things that are just impossible. How do you manage that from day one with your experience? You've done it several times, you guys.
Set priorities. I think that anybody in service of an owner has to understand that they have to march to the owner's tune one way or another, and they have to manage that message with the shipyard and with the suppliers and the key engineering support. I know Uh, I know in my latest project, what we did is we set out the priorities in the build team right up front, pre-contract, and we set up a multi-year budget that showed to the boss where different support members would come in, what they would be doing, and how to do it. And we have to prioritize on first things first. And unfortunately, a lot of that is the boss man's interior, the guest spaces, and then how to make that service spaces work with it. One technique I've found, Pixie talked about AVIT, is don't go for a furniture design that incorporates the features too closely into the interior construction of the boat. I know we try to have features that are unseen and they're seamless and perfect, but sometimes we burn ourselves, particularly in the area of technology. Like, you know, you go on an integrated bridge of a boat that's 15 years old and you can't believe that they had 8-track cassette players in there and that they were using CRT2 displays, but they're built into the furniture and it'll cost the boss man, you know, $12 million to rip it out and put in a new bridge.
Keep the old bridge.
Yeah, but that makes sense because, like Tommy, and then I'm going to leave you back to Dan. But Tommy said earlier, like in his new build, he only had 7 changes. I mean, that's exceptional because, like everybody I've spoken to, that they would like dream of that number of 7 over that period of time. So, what did you do to make that happen?
Well, to be honest, the owner wasn't going to pay for it. He said that's what it is, and he did a hell of a job building the boat. But with the AVIT side of life, to be honest, in an internet-driven world, it's internet and Wi-Fi that is going to be our biggest driver in a lot of things. As long as we can get the internet on board at the speeds that they need, and you've got good Wi-Fi coverage. So it's making sure the boat has good mapping, good Wi-Fi access points throughout the boat, because as smart technology starts to take over and the boats get smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, we need to be able to provide that. And as things get smarter, our crew, as much as we love them, are never going to be able to keep up with it. They're not going to have the skills to maintain it. And we're going to need external people interfacing with the boat, which again needs bandwidth. It's all about what bandwidth we can get in and what upwidth we can get as well. So it's a lot of that needs to be taken into consideration as you try and future-proof it. How big the sat domes are, what range you've got, what buck size you've got. It's all of those different bits and pieces that you need to think about. And again, you can add to them, but how ugly is the boat going to get the bigger the domes they get? So that's where design takes over again.
Well, here's where Pixie's going to put in Starlink.
I think so. It's got to be, hasn't it?
Got out.
Well, it's yeah. As Tommy says, you have to listen to the experts in the field and understand. You have to touch base with those vendors that have their finger on the pulse of it. You know, as we look now, even on a project that started the beginning of the year, maybe Satcom C or maybe the GMDSS arrangements will take advantage of Iridium as an approved method of second means of communication. Maybe we will be using Starlink instead of VSAT for the data transmission capability. And these are world-changing things. I mean, when we look at that, there's a lot of technology, a lot of experience based on VSAT, and then all of a sudden we're going to be looking at Starlink as an alternate method. Wow, that's a game changer. And how do you keep up with that? Just keep in touch with the best people. How do you manage those expectations? Don't get too narrowly focused on it. It has to be the proverbial USB charging port built into the furniture. You know, you want to do that. You want to make it look as great as possible. So you have to manage that, and you have to make those decisions as a project leader.
Yeah, Dan, one thing that, to consider, I know we talked about it yesterday, and I think it's quite prevalent to this conversation, is the burden that's put on these ETO guys now. I mean, they're like IT guys that are coming into the marine industry, and they're on board the boat, and they've got to manage and keep all this stuff going. And, when anything breaks, God forbid the guest couldn't get Netflix or something or whatever, the pressure's on these lads or gals or whoever. And, only in our experience, and we deal with quite a few of the people on board the boats that handle that, because we have to dial into the systems. And I'm totally impressed the last couple of years with the quality of knowledge of these people that don't have they can't just run down the street and buy something. They're out in the middle of the ocean, and they keep everything going. And I think that's it's really a real growing area. And every boat over 55 meters or so has a specialist in that area.
Oh, absolutely. And you hit on it. The poor girls that get it the first, when they touch their pressure controls and it's not working and the TV doesn't come on quick enough, there's a delay of 3 seconds.
Yeah.
I've worked for some people who get kind of irate at that, and poor ETOs getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning because they can't watch Fox News or some other news channel at that time. It's a stressful job, and some of these guys are not the nicest when they want to watch something at 4 o'clock in the morning. Was that politically correct enough?
20 years ago, Tommy, the chef was getting up to make the boss a hamburger. Now the IT guy is getting up to get Twitter going.
It is, and it's tough on them because these guys, they work so hard when there's guests on, and they do such an amazing job.
Yeah.
It always blows me away the talent that these boats have in the crewing department, the skills, the ability for them to get along and make these magical vacations for the guys that pay our salaries, and yet they put up with moments like that. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, they're tired, they're upset, they're stressed, and I can only imagine. Okay, we've got used to it. We've become slightly numb to it over the years. But these guys, they do such an amazing job. And AVIT you're going to end up with more than one. It's going to become two. Then you're going to end up with someone in the interior department that runs guest service related stuff. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's a really. I think it's a growing part of the crew business, and it's just going to extend itself. Really, it's going to keep going. And you need these people on board the boat, and they're going to be super knowledgeable. And then you've got the support services that back them up on shore as well. And that's a whole other business in itself. And when you take a situation like where Pixie is, where he's coming to the end of a build, and I think you said this yesterday, Pixie, it suddenly goes all about, the AV and everything that goes with it. It becomes sort of paramount to the whole program at the end there.
It's happening right now. We've got communication backwards and forwards with equipment that was designated and approved and checked by the owner that it was exactly what he wanted, and now there's subtle changes that the ETO is heavily involved in to try and get everything back up and running again. So, but I think as well, more and more shoreside is going to provide much more backup and help for the boats with remote monitoring, remote access. And I also think, though, that a lot of the equipment is a lot more robust than it was, and the installations are more robust than they used to be. These are really purpose-built, custom installations that will be serviced and well looked after by shore-based, to leave the ETOs more time to care for the guests.
Yeah.
Pixie, have you felt that boats have become overcomplicated, or were yachtified for the sake of making it pretty?
Overcomplicated. I think that's becoming more and more obvious. The ability of the control systems to give people ways out of doing things are overcomplicating everything. I've got a quick example: tender fueling. You turn a valve on, you open up a nozzle, and you put a pump on. It's pretty simple, but nowadays it seems to be that it all has to be fully automated and interlocked, and you can't use this and you can't use that, and worries about spillage and everything. The technology appears to be also taking away the freedom of people and the use of their knowledge and training to do their job as well. But that's an old man.
Tommy, have you seen overcomplication in your career, or?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with Pixie more. They're just there's too many fail safes now for what was a really fail safe system in the first place. People do like to throw, and again, I was going to ask Pixie, how many people have you got in your build team at the moment, crew wise? Because unfortunately, what I found was I kept 5 crew up until, which an ETO was one of them, up until about 2 months before the launch. The hardest thing I find is too many people want to chip in their wonderful knowledge, and then decision making becomes incredibly difficult because people get upset when their decisions don't get listened to. And things like fueling is one of those things. If it was just left to the engineer and the captain, it would be, as you say, valve, pump, fill, done.
Yeah, we've only had 3 really on the build all the way through, but unfortunately, a lot of these things are decided by the yard, and what you have written in the spec is what you think is a basic system. You then find when you come to start commissioning that it has already been taken out of your hands and it's provided for you as a bonus.
Yeah,
which isn't necessarily what you require.
Yeah, I from my experience, I think trying to simplify things can really help. A number of builders have approached the owners I've worked with and proposed hybrid propulsion systems, the latest, the greatest, environmentally friendly, blah, blah, blah. But my viewpoint is if the owner can't call and say, I'm on the way, let's get the boat underway, because it's broken down, because the circuit board is broken and gone back to the one manufacturer of the bit, or the manufacturer has gone out of business, then it defeats the purpose of the owner having a boat. So straightforward propulsion has always been my recommendation. Diesel electric can be quite okay as well. But taking it to the next step for yachting purposes in today's technology level makes it too complicated, because we also have to think about the labor pool that we draw upon in the yachting industry, in the yachting recreational sector, if you want to call it that. We have young people that are interested in adventure. They want to go on a boat. They want to see foreign places. They want to do these things. And that doesn't necessarily attract the most technically skilled electronic technician who, as we talked about yesterday, might already be in the military and doesn't want to go away from home anymore, or may find that their pay packet is quite satisfactory on land and there's no reason for them to go to sea to make a paycheck. So that's one of the things we talked about. Don't make the boat overcomplicated. John, what are you seeing for suppliers? What demands are these big new build projects putting on you guys to come up with the latest, greatest ideas? The hydraulic television.
I know. Can you imagine? The pressure's immense, honestly.
The pressure's immense with that hydraulic TV setup. That's right.
It's called the pass-through program. So, yeah,
Tell us a little bit.
That's always the story, isn't it? I mean, we're like what's called the second tier. So the first tier is the builder. That's the shipyard. They build the ship and the client interface to the client. And then people like us, we're like the second tier supplier. We're, the builder of the major components that go into the boat. So like the engines, the generators, stabilizers, and, other major pieces of equipment. So we have to look at specifications, and on the sort of boats we're working on now, which is mostly over 100 meters or in the 100-meter range, the technical specifications that come down the pipeline are quite phenomenal. And we usually have to spend a few weeks studying them before we can even provide a real quotation. And again, that always comes on the heels of the budgetary pricing in the beginning of the job, when we didn't know what the hull looked like, we didn't know how fast the boat rolled, we didn't know what it weighed, but we kind of had an idea. And so, the shipyard has puts a budget in there, and they quote the boat and they get the job. And then they come in with a, specification that looks like the Yellow Pages.
Well, what are they pushing on roll reduction, size, weight, power, cycle time? What are they pushing you guys on?
Everything. And the money.
And the money. Well, there's always that.
Oh no, but I mean, a lot of it doesn't always come from the shipyard, because the specification writers could be people like Pixie who have experience, and they go to the shipyard and they go, here's our technical spec. And that could be a simple thing as, every voltage control wire has to be brown or green, or every wire has to have a marker at both ends of it. It could be anything as simple as that, or it could be something even much more important, like interference on the switchboard, harmonic distortion, things that become really critical. But those are things that, fortunately, we stay a little bit ahead of the game, and most of the builders we work for are people we've worked for before, so we kind of understand what's coming down the pipeline, and we accommodate for it. But it's not uncommon for a builder to be influenced by, or it could be you, Dan, or it could be Tommy, it could be anybody that's come in and said, well, okay, it's great you're building our boat, but here's our specification, here's some adjustments. And then the yard has to field that back out to guys like us. So that's something we deal with that nobody or the crew don't see, or it doesn't show up later on. It's just something you have to deal with. But then you have to look at performance. And that's a big one for us, really, performance, because there's what the owner expects and what we're delivering. And there can sometimes be a disparity about that. And recently we've signed, we've started 2 new jobs in the last year and a half, where both times we went to the model tank to test the performance of the stabilizers. And we didn't just test the owner's new boat, we tested his old boat that he already had, because he wanted to see his old boat alongside his new boat to make sure his new boat didn't roll as much. And that seemed bizarre to me the first time, but then we did it the second time with another owner, and it kind of made sense, because he said, hey, I already got this boat and I want to make sure my new, boat is better. And the way to do that is to see both boats in the model tank, I guess. So they'll go to great lengths to do that. And sometimes the performance is as expected and sometimes it's not. And then during construction, of course, things change and, all that. So it's all about those ratcheting those expectations down. But at the same time, we're trying to build, super high-end product now that's super quiet, efficient, performance is great. When we built a zero-speed stabilizer, 17 years ago, and we got, sitting in, St. Martin on any normal day in the winter, if we could get 40% roll reduction, we were, the happiest people on the planet. 40% today would be totally unacceptable. Your phone would be ringing off the wall from, everybody on the boat saying the stabilizers don't work at all. So, people expect these things to work better now, and they expect them to be quieter and power consumption less and things. So everybody's working towards that and building a better product. But at the same time, you're trying to keep the technology manageable. And that's what we were talking about earlier. It's great to have technology, great to have fantastic performance, all these things that are out there, albeit engines or AV gear or whatever. But there's people on board these boats that's going to have to look after this stuff down the road. And hopefully, we can do it through the internet connection on board, and we can handle it remotely, and we don't have to be on every boat. And what we're seeing now, of course, is, we're in these current times, and especially the last year, they don't really want you on the boat. So you have to work remotely. And fortunately for us, we do have remote access to most everything that we've built. And it's really been a lifesaver for us that we can dial into the boat and, see what's going on. Of course, we could slow down the internet and somebody loses Netflix and then they kick us off. So forget the stabilizer, guys. I'm watching my favorite series.
Well, that's part of that prioritization that has to come right up front. And I guess the AVIT officer can crank you guys right on down if need be.
Yeah.
But, you're talking about how technology's gone on. When you were talking a little while ago, it just occurred to me that there was this boat many years ago that was built, and it was about a 60-knot boat. And the boat was around about 45 meters. So it was a fast boat. And the whole boat was computer controlled, as well as it could be computer controlled in 1992. And that consisted of these big hard drives under the dash that were spinning around. And every time you hit a wave, everything went out and the boat veered to the left. And then the hard drive would get running again and the steering would come back on. And they thought that was just fine. Could you imagine that today? That would be unimaginable today. But that was technology. This was the greatest technology. 2 computers under the bridge spinning around, with a hard drive.
What do you think about electronic documentation, Pixie? Are you seeing a trend towards doing more electronic documentation versus the old paper books and the binder libraries you used to have?
Yeah, much more. And I think it's and I do think it's a good thing. It's a lot easier to manage. It's a lot easier to update if we need to update the equipment. Yeah, certainly. It's and you don't have to carry 162 manuals on board somewhere.
Yeah, plus another set at the owner's warehouse.
Yeah.
You were outdated the day you took delivery of the boat.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You know, I've managed a number of projects over the recent years, and believe it or not, I'm very much have been very much a paper guy. I like to touch it, see it, and look at it. But over the years, I've come to realize that there's so much more utility in the electronic documentation packages, especially if they're searchable a little bit. If it's just an image, it's not so easy. But yeah, it's really good. I have all of the documentation for several very large yachts right here on my computer, and it's or up in the cloud, easy enough to get to.
When I left De Vries in 2016, I ordered 500 De Vries Aquarius reef binders. I have 350 of them sitting at National Marine, not used. That's just.
I think Dean told him.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, even here at home, when we get the tax return, we scan it. You know, I mean, it's just. To have a really good copier, you know, that was an actual discussion in the recent design discussions for the ship's office. We needed a place for a large copier scanner, not a little one that you buy from HP, but like the big Ryko one that you rent from the office supply place, and you put the documents in and they go because you're scanning so much stuff nowadays. And you know, what do you want to keep a printed copy of the crew landing list when you arrived at St. Martin 3 years ago, where you just put it on electronically? You got it.
Yeah,
exactly.
One of the other topics we talked a little bit about was engine room layout. Pixie, over the years, you've done a few engine rooms.
Yeah, one or two.
All over the world, man. I've seen you doing engine rooms. So, what do you like to think about when you're laying out an engine room or talking with the captain in the shipyard about engine rooms?
Maintenance, really, as much as anything. Ease of being able to get around. Maintenance, really, more than anything else. The aftercare and making sure that all the equipment is readily accessible, and we've got good ventilation in the place, which again nowadays is harder and harder because that real estate is taken much more by the principal, and yeah, it's a very difficult situation, very difficult now.
Yeah, we were when I was looking with our friends in Holland about doing a new build a couple of years ago. They kept their desire to put their generators in sound boxes, which I hadn't seen since the 90s when I was on sailboats. When we were actually able to, again, here I've got my generators are in individual rooms so that we can go in and work on them. Again, that takes up a little bit of space, but it's for the engineers, it's a nightmare to work on things where you can't actually see the engines and get behind sound boxes and things. So yeah, diesel electric is great, but they compress the engine rooms and do other bits and pieces. So again, engine room layout is super important. Sorry, I'm just trying to
it all depends, you know, where you come in on the project. If you can be at the beginning, at the roots of the project, and the space that's required is allocated and left not to be touched, then you're okay. But it just doesn't happen.
Oh, Pixie, I'm just thinking back to some projects. I'm just thinking the looks on the faces that must have been when certain decisions were made and said, no, scrap that. I'm having this. And there was no debate. You just had to do it.
Yep.
Yeah. I faced that. I don't lose a lot of sleep over it anymore, but I used to.
Hey, Dan, just flipping back there to when you were talking about documentation, and it occurred to me that one thing we see more now, especially, and it's crew related, it's a younger crew, it's a different sort of gender of people or what they're used to, but they're not looking for manuals, they're looking for YouTube videos, you know? And if you can post on YouTube, you know, like for us, how to change the stabilizer filter and do a video, that's more of a go-to all the time. And I think that that's something that people like us suppliers have to consider and contemplate. It's not just, having documentation, but it's, addressing the way people, operate these days. And they go down to a pump or something in the engine room and they've got a phone. And if they can see a YouTube video of how that pump comes apart, that's way, way more important to them than go and find a manual on a computer somewhere. And companies, have to work towards that. Go ahead, Anna.
What I saw is obviously I'm not as experienced as you are, and I haven't been on boat for ages. But what I see now is that they even put QR codes on equipment where you can where your app go there, and you can you get the information right on your app and see it. And I'm working with guys from Centini Marine, and they've got this Yacht Knowledge app where you can do your ISM SOLAS testing. You constantly, every day, get 20 questions just to keep you up to date and do all these kind of things. It's all becoming digitalized nowadays. Where you basically walk around with your iPhone or with your iPad or whatever, and you just scan something, and it'll tell you how it works with a YouTube with a little 30-second YouTube movie, because they can't watch any longer.
That's a pretty interesting thing, because it feeds back to the necessary bandwidth, the available bandwidth that you have to put the infrastructure in to have if everybody's expecting that to be come down, unless it's preloaded onto the ship's server, which all of a sudden becomes a deliverable of the shipyard, which becomes a deliverable of the supplier, and then what format do you put it in?
It's going to be highly interesting. But I believe it's a development that will happen at a certain point. And I haven't heard Pixie yet on 3D printing of equipment.
Right? I haven't seen any 3D print of equipment yet. Only the models that they produce for the boat, but it's there for sure.
I mean, I can imagine a 3D print on board when something breaks, when it's small, you just you get these specifications from the supplier, you press a 3D printer instead of having to ship it to our friends of anybody, and I don't want to take away their jobs because I love them to bits, but that's also what's going to happen in the future, right?
Oh yeah, Quantum is going to do it for their stabilizer stocks. You go to Target, and you buy a card and some liquid.
And then you can pick the color, right? You can pick the color
right up.
When you guys start printing credit cards, give me a call. Yeah.
The
3D printer will have to be nice and small though, because that's only going to replace the workshop that's already been taken out because of what they used to repair all the equipment with.
Yeah, for the engine room viewing tunnel.
Yeah, I've got you there, Pixie. You probably they probably put it in the real estate part, as you mentioned it, because the youngsters want to have it. So this might be one that you get a lot of space for.
Hey,
could do. That's a good point to think about. Mention it to the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
I was watching YouTube yesterday about shipbuilding, and it's actually having a kick, because one of the things that came up, and I have seen it in certain shipyards, is the sign off that comes on an iPad now. So when the technician or when the tradespeople or the project manager or the topic manager comes and they don't produce the old form that they used to. They produce an electronic pad. And this also helps the shipyard with cash flow management for recurring events, where if the guy comes and takes the trash up, you sign on the iPad for the trash and it goes straight to the billing database that you disposed of 4 cubic meters of trash or 25 oil filters or something like that, and the signature's captured. This is quite interesting. I see this on new construction sign-offs. This type of software, another type of software that we're seeing in the industry, and we're trying to do a little bit better with it on the new construction, is this type of software that a crew member can enter in a defect or a point on their phone, and it gets loaded into a centralized database. Seems to be work on a Microsoft SharePoint website, and that's quite interesting, where you can generate work lists, especially in operation. One of the large yachts that I'm involved with in operation, they give it to the stewardesses, and anytime there's a scratch or a leaky faucet or something, a broken light bulb, a sticky lock, they put it right in. The engineer's got it within a minute.
there is also the argument that they can spend too much time on their phones, not getting things done.
That's where that captain expertise comes in.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a call coming in.
I'm in the engine room. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Lights are on, right? Air conditioning's cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dan, we're using a system now for commissioning, very similar, where as part of handovers, you add these points, which add to a GA. It's all done on your phone. It takes seconds to do, and it keeps a good historical as well. And the yard aren't allowed to sign things off; they're allowed to comment. So these things don't get disappeared into the 4 a.m. massive emails where you're trying to chase up a leaking pipe. And we're finding it's working out very good. We've only been using it for 6 months, unfortunately, but next project I would definitely use it from the beginning.
I'll give you a call because I'm in talks with them about which GA I want to put on.
Okay.
Or a list because that's just pixel mapping.
Yeah, we started using that right at the very end of 695. It was really cool as we were going through the interior stuff. It was a great piece of technology.
Absolutely, it's a great tool to use, and as I say, historically wise, I mean, it gives you a really good record to build up things on maintenance and what have you as well.
Yeah.
Super. Now we talked a little bit here about their geographic laws and regulations where a vessel's built. I think a lot of people are quite familiar. It's part of the training nowadays that the people on board receive with classification, with flag state, MCA, the Marshall Islands codes, the large yacht codes, and such as they've evolved, Red Ensign Group. And then I thought a little bit about how the interface with the locals works. One thing I always remember from doing projects in Italy is how dark and dreary the enclosures were because the lighting was bad. And in questioning the locals about it, well, it turned out that only 24-volt lighting could be used because it was a local safety regulation. And in fact, the last time I was in a shipyard in Italy, it was the same regulation. They could only use low voltage lighting on the work site because of the presence of water and electrocution hazards. What have you guys found in your experience? Because all of us have worked all over the world. John has turned up in a lot of different countries where I've been. I think I've seen your team on 3 or 4 or 5 different continents. So, what do you find, Tommy, on getting along with the locals and at the yard and relationships with the yard? Because I think that's a big part of success.
Yeah, to be honest, it's been fun doing it. Obviously, different locations have different customs regulations and everything else. And if you're well prepared, we've got 3 parts that we didn't really think about stuck in customs at DHL here in Savannah. I just arrived in Savannah this morning, and again, with good help from the shipyards on both sides of the Atlantic, you can move along quite nicely. And I've been in South Pacific. And again, everybody tries to help for whatever reason. People are enamored with yachts and tend to want to help people. It's something alluring about the size of one of these great big white things or a beautiful sailboat that kind of encourages people to kind of muck in. You've got the sort of the traveler spirit of the crew, and everybody kind of gets that sort of vibe, and everyone's pushing in the same direction. So yeah, as long as you're good and respectful for everybody, they tend to help you.
Pixie, any thoughts? You've worked all over the world.
Yeah, normally language is the biggest issue, is making yourself understood and understanding them, and body language, them realizing that sometimes they don't actually understand English jokes, which can be quite unhelpful at times.
Are you talking English or American jokes?
Well, Americans don't have jokes. They're only.
I feel like I'm being abused here.
Oh, Pixie, thank you so much for just for taking that one.
I think Louisiana can be a challenge.
Oh well, that's a good point. I have found over the years, because I actually worked for a foreign shipbuilder in a foreign shipyard, and with my colleagues at the shipyard. Certainly not an adversarial situation. We're all on the same team. But yeah, certain jokes and certain things have to be said in a certain way. Otherwise, offense can be taken. I mean, in certain countries, this means okay. And in other countries, that means something entirely different. So you have to be careful about that and advise your younger team members, hey, when you hail the bus, don't be doing that. You might get a thump. And there's expressions that don't correspond. When we think about in either UK English or American English, the whole 9 yards. Well, that refers to taking a whole bolt of cloth at the marketplace back in the old days when it was cheap, when a market was called cheap. And you say, "I'll have the whole 9 yards" to a German, and they just look at you. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't get to the yard and tell them you're stepping out the back for a fag.
Yeah, I'm going out back for a fag. Yeah, exactly. This is so that the cultural awareness is important. I think that I think it's discussed openly in yachting nowadays. Sure, it is.
Gentlemen, we're going close towards an hour. It's a great topic. Anything else, Dan, you wanted to touch base on?
No, I think that awareness, situational awareness, and working with those circles of influence in any big project. I mean, you have to satisfy people like John are always coming at you in an aggressive way. There's people like Pixie who are over demanding and require things that just simply can't be accommodated no matter what. You got Tommy, man, beating the drum for the boss, man. We're never going to get this done right. But it's this politics, the idea of working well with others in delegation, the power of delegation. Tommy, you mentioned about build teams, and we've talked about it. There's a very well-known yachtsman who has 5 or 6 big boats, and he has never sent a team to the shipyard.
No.
He just orders the boat and has it delivered.
And
and he's very, very insistent that you not interfere with that process. I've had owners that wanted to be involved every day and were calling you every single day about it. And I've had an owner who said, "I want a white boat in Monaco 2 Septembers from now. That's it." And meet the designers once.
Dan, that particular guy you mentioned, I think, he told me one time that you sign a contract with the shipyard, you don't send a captain, you don't send a survey, and you don't go yourself, there's no chance you can get a change order.
No, he explained his experience to me personally about change orders being driven by people other than himself, and that was the end of the discussion.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I just wanted to say, especially about the build process, and I spent the last year of 695 in Holland, and doing a build. There's something incredibly special about that experience. And as we prance around the world in our uniforms and our beautiful sunglasses, our Rolex watches, etc., there's an understanding that these amazing people who build these boats, from the janitor to the man at the top of the company to the guys that supply the stabilizers and the engines, it's mind-blowing to get to know them and to see what they do, and then just see what they've spent 3 years of their lives just sail out the front door and us take it away and enjoy and reap the benefits of it. It was quite humbling, to be honest, and knowing that they will know the boat better than anybody else that ever works on it, and because people are never there long enough. And again, that was, as I say, I loved every minute of being there at the shipyard and taking it out, and I'm still very proud of what we achieved.
Can I take this beautiful words from Tommy to close this off? Because I think that's very well spoken, Tommy.
Pleasure.
You got it.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think that's Gentlemen, this was quite an entertaining session. I took away a lot. I make a lot of notes. I've learned about the sphere of influence. I learned about how new technology can be amazing, but can also be quite devastating in the end. I've learned about the word real estate being mentioned in building a yard, Pixie. I took that away from you. People see it that way. AVIT, how important that's becoming more and more important, bandwidth, upwidth, AVIT, etc. And Pixie, I've learned today that like you're always last in line, although you make the boat go where it needs to go, right?
No problem.
You're first in line when the toilet doesn't work. Every engineer knows that, man. No toilet, no air conditioning, no light, no internet. You're number one on the list.
What about that subject? Shall we talk about Dan's fee for today?
It's not even 1/100th of a quantum unit, John.
Well, quantum is a good name for a new Bitcoin kind of thing.
I do like the Q. I like the Q. That's very timely in the United States, John.
Yeah. You should make your own currency.
Yeah, we could. It could be a currency. The guy on the Luna once told me he called them quantum bars. Because how are we supposed to revarnish that cap rail? And the guy said, "Oh, I don't know, like 40 grand." He goes, "Oh, it's like 3 quantum bars."
Quantum bars.
Quantum
unit. John, I'll tell you over the telephone what I think a quantum unit is, but every time I get an invoice, I just measure how many quantum units it is.
I think Tommy just got kicked out, but I still want to thank him. I want to thank you so much, Quantum, for organizing all of this. I think it was a very interesting session for a lot of people. So Dan, thank you so much for hosting it. John, thank you for being here. Pixie, thank you for being here. And Tommy dropped out, but I think his internet just gave up. You need to get some more bandwidth on that vessel.